Hey, I'm back. This is Chandler with Melda Production, and today I'm going to show you how you can do some advanced pads and atmospheres in MSoundfactory. Somebody requested this video and they wanted to know, like, how do you use MSoundfactory's per voice effects and features to create some, atmospheric stuff and some interesting things. So I thought I'd show you how to do that and try to do some more advanced sounding pads. So let's get started. So you see here, just in the globals page, we can set the attack and envelope. Let's set this a little bit longer here. Set the release a little bit longer. Sorry about my voice, I've been a little bit under the weather, but hopefully you can understand me. I'll turn down the volume a little bit too. And let's go into the generator. So the first thing we're going to need is an oscillator. We have it here. Saw wave. I just like to smooth this out a little bit, so it should just sound like this. Okay, and we'll use a filter after that, and this is just so far a basic pad sound with the resonance down. The frequency, I'll go into here, use envelope 1 here, open it up. Let's make this somewhat long like this. Turn the sustain all the way up. There we go. Now let's try it and move the depth up until it sounds right. So that's kind of like a basic pad, and we can go in here. One thing I might want to do is change it to random phase. That'll just get a little bit of a difference. It doesn't have too much of a difference though, but I'll do the pitch drift thing I showed in probably the first video for MSoundfactory. And I'll go into here and just hit random 1 under LFO. And what this will do is it'll give it a random pitch shift. So let's change the depth to maybe like 4 or so, like this. So you can hear it changing a little bit. It's going a little bit too fast, so let's move the speed down like this. I can move it up a little bit higher, maybe 5% or so. So you're thinking like, okay, what difference does it make if it's going up and down? But because this is per voice, each voice is moving differently, so it's going slightly in and out of tune for each note I'm playing. So if I move it up, you can hear it a little bit more easily. That's way too much, but moving it down here just gives it a little bit subtle movement like this. Probably a little bit too much. I like to keep it around 4, so it just gives it a little bit of life to it. So here we are, and this is just like a basic pad we could use for something if we wanted. But you're thinking, okay, well, that's okay, but can't we do something else? And we can. So I could go into the frequency here, into this envelope 1, and I think, okay, this is cool, but let's add something else. I could add tremolo here. So like this, move this a little bit slower. And do something like this. And that's all right. But let's say we wanted to do something else. Like, I don't like that sine wave. I just click this little wrench here, and I can open this up, and I can change this however I want. So if I think, okay, I don't like this, I can go into the custom, pop this out, and go into here, hit drawing mode, and now I can just go back in here and like this. Whoa. There we go. If that's a good shape, I don't know. But you kind of get the idea of all the things you can do with it. And now I can use this as my LFO shape. Here, make it slower. And let's try this. Actually, that doesn't sound good at all. So let's go back and change that back to the sine wave like that. So that's just an idea what you can do. You can draw that in, and hopefully you're better at drawing than I am, so you can do something a little bit better. Or if I wanted to use a step sequencer, I could do something like this. But I think let's leave it at the sine wave. That seems okay for now. Let's turn the depth down a little bit. Okay, so it's a little bit interesting, but you're probably thinking, like, this powerful synth, can it do more? And yes, it can. So let's do something a little bit more advanced. Let's go into here to the phaser. Now, like this, I could just leave it like this and it has a phaser sound. But let's do more with this. So turn down the rate at first, so it's just a little bit slower. That's good. Let's turn the voice phase to random. So I like that, where it's giving me lots of stereo effect and it sounds good. But you're probably thinking, like, isn't there more we could do with this? And in fact, there is. So one of the things we could do with this is we could influence the wet dry or even the rate, depending on how many notes we're playing. So something I didn't show before was this. So let's say this polyphony 2. So I'll go into here and I'll hook this up to the rate. So to show you what it does, let's say if I put it at 0 and then turn the depth halfway up. The first note I hit, you're not going to hear any phaser, or you're just going to hear a really slow phaser like this. Sounds like it's not moving. But when I hit a second note, it's going to move all the way up to the top of the depth, so 55% like this. So that means the first note will be at the bottom and all subsequent notes will be at the top here, like this. So that's, I think, kind of cool, but the way I would probably use this is maybe set this to polyphony 4, and instead of setting this at the bottom, set this back where it was, around like 3 or so, and then turn this negative, so that way each note will go progressively slightly slower, like this. So that way all the notes aren't moving at the same pace, and you get a little bit more randomness to it. Also, let me move this from 4 to about 12 like this, so I have more voices, I should say. So I think that's much more interesting, and we can even do more. So let's try the same thing with the wet dry. Move this down to 0, add our polyphony 2 here, so that way our bass note has no phaser on it, and then as we move up, it'll have more eventually. Let's move this up to like 50% here. So just one note, no phasing. But let's try the second note. And now let's play a whole chord. So you can hear all the different notes I'm playing are moving at slightly different rates, and I could exaggerate that if I wanted to. Move it up here, move this down here like this. So that's one interesting thing you can do with this and the multi-voice effects. Of course, you don't have to use the phaser, you can use a flanger or anything else. But let me show you something else I used that was somewhat similar to this. So, I made a very complex patch here, starting with a wavetable and then going through a bunch of effects that sounds like this. So I enjoyed making this, and hopefully you enjoyed listening to it. So let me kind of show you how I made that. We'll remake it together. So all I did was I started with a wavetable. So let's get rid of this here. And let's choose a wavetable. Let's choose wavetable 8 here. And hook up a LFO to it. Just quickly here. I want it going fairly slow like this. And I want it to go all the way to the top. And let's try 4 like this. Actually, let's try 3. I don't want to waste too much time. So now they're all the same thing, but let's try to change this first one to something that sounds kind of like a organ. So let's try this one at first, see if this sounds good. Can't really hear it. Let me turn this off for a second, the filter off. Let's change this to a different organ. Let's try Church 1. And let's change the third one to something else, maybe Jazz 2. And now let's hear what this sounds like. I don't like how these two sound the same. Let's change it to something else. Maybe this will be a little bit different. No, it's not. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to get something that will give us a slightly different sound. Okay, so maybe that's enough. Now let's put the filter on. Okay, so that's our bass sound, and it sounds okay. And if I add a unison there, it'll sound even better, like this. Now, to be honest, I could stop right there, but actually let's do something different. So let's leave the unison off here. I like the filter, but actually here, where it has wavetable 8, let's go into the initial phase and change this to random. So that means that each note I hit will start at a different point in the wave, I believe. Actually, not in here, sorry, made a mistake. So I'll go into LFO and do the same thing. So initial phase inside the LFO, so that way it'll be starting at a different point in this wavetable each time. So it should sound a little bit more random and more interesting, like this. So I think that's one of the really interesting things you can do with MSoundfactory that isn't available on other synthesizers. But let's keep going. So another thing I want to do is let's add some granular effects to this. So I'm going into the FX here, and I'm going to open, let's say, M granular MB here. I could use the normal version, but you'll see why I'm not in a second. So let's go into here. First thing I'm going to do is just turn the output down so it doesn't clip too much. Change this to about 10 copies. Let me pop this out so you can see it. Let's change the pan to random, the max copy delay to 1 second, and let's play it and hear how it sounds. Sounds pretty good, except for 2 things. I don't like that, like cutting sound like that. So I can increase the grain size a little bit to about 100, and then change the crossfade. So now it should sound smoother. So now I have good stereo width, and if I change the pitch random up just a little bit, it should get a little interesting effect here, like this. That's a little bit better. If I move it all the way up, it's gonna sound kind of like a mess, but sometimes that's cool too. So if I do something like this, if you like that, you can do it, but I want to keep it down pretty low, like here. Okay, and now let's do something else with the second voice. So just turn this off for now so I can hear this by itself. Move this down. Do everything, for the most part, the same. Change this to 10. put the pitch random up, put the max copy delay up. Oh, I should also change this copy delay random, move this down. I should do that on the other one too. Oh, it already is down. I was smart. So anyways, let's move this up. The pitch, I want this to be an octave up. So just hit 12 here, and let's hear what this sounds like. And so that's okay, but if you notice, you hear that prrr sound again, and it's actually coming down a little bit lower than it should. So if you look here on the spectrograph here, it's really bad below 200. So we're thinking, like, how can we get rid of that? So there's lots of ways you could do that, but I found the easiest way is to use this multiband. Just right-click here inside this band setting, and then hit Insert to the left. Okay. And now the right, this is everything we had before. To the left, below, let's say about 250 or so, we're just going to bypass it. I'm not going to use it at all. I can turn this off, but I could just bypass it there. And so this is what we had before. Should sound a little bit better now. So it's a little bit better. Still not perfect, and there's other things I could do, like changing the random or the grain count to make it a little bit smoother, but I'm fairly satisfied with it there. Now I'm going to change the wet dry, move this down so it's not 100% granular, and let's hear what this sounds like. Oh, turn voice 1 on also. So I think, okay, that sounds pretty cool. It's close to what I want. Now, what else can we do? We can put a chorus on it to make it sound even smoother. Just use like a basic setting, use vintage. Now let's hear how it sounds. Oh, you need to turn the saturation down. Don't like that. And let's turn the range down a little bit more. And let's turn the voices up to like 6. Now that's the type of ambient sound I like. So now I think we're getting someplace. And you want to do more? Let's do more. So if you notice the first version I showed you, it had kind of like a rhythmic thing going, and we can do that here. So let's go to the generator, and out of this filter, let's add another filter in lane 2. Click here, add filter, right click it, and then choose input 1 here. And all we're going to do, I'm going to turn the resonance down a bit. We're going to add an LFO to this, LFO2. And we're going to set the LFO as a step sequencer. So I'll sync this to tempo. Let's sync this to like a half note. Step sequencer. Just go into edit. And we'll use a preset I made for Euclidean rhythms. I think I talked about this before in MWobbler, but they're in here too. Euclidean rhythms. Actually, maybe it's in mine. Maybe you don't have it. If you don't, let me know and I'll try to put those on the Melda online exchange so you can get them. And from here, everything should be set up correctly. And I'm just going to increase the depth until I hear what I want to hear. So let's go to FX here, shut this one down, and let's just listen to what's coming out of that filter. So that's sounding pretty good, although it might be a little bit low in volume. I might want to just boost the volume just a little bit like that. Okay. Now let's go back into FX, turn this back on, and we can just use a ratio here to combine these together. Now that I have this here, I'll just right click it, sidechain, steal the sidechain input there. Now I can go back and forth to just that sequencer sound like this. Or just the granular pad sound like this. And then I can move it and like find a middle ground that I like. I like that. And then to finish it off, let's just add reverb here very quickly. Choose Dirty Hall. Length is okay. And let's hear what this sounds like. So I hope that gave you an idea of what you can do with that. I'll show you one more thing. So this one is using like physical modeling. I'm using the modal filter. So here we go. This is a device I've been working on, not quite finished yet. But basically what it does is it puts white noise through a modal filter, and by itself it just sounds kind of like this, which isn't always so pleasant. Okay, but you're thinking, okay, what can you do with it? You see here where it says harmonics, you can adjust each of these to add different harmonic content, add it or subtract it like this. Or subtract it like this. Okay, so you get the basic idea, and you can kind of create your own sound with that. And of course, I can use a filter here if I think there's too much high end, like this. But I think the interesting part here is where it says odd harmonic movement and even harmonic movement. So let's actually look in here at the modal filter. So you see each of these has something going on with the modulation. So if we look into, you see, it's being controlled by random 1, and 3 is being controlled by random 1, etc. And so when I go and I change these multi-parameters, like let's say odd harmonics, watch what happens when I do that. So you can see all the odd harmonics are moving in volume up and down. And I can do the same thing with even harmonics. So if I move them both up like this. So you can hear there's a lot of things going on, and it's like, oh, okay, it's interesting. It's kind of moving, and it's giving it some movement, and it's a random movement, which is interesting. Another thing I have in here is I can change the speed of it, obviously, but I can also increase the width like this. So now it's mono, but if I move it up, and then you see another knob called inharmonic, and you're thinking like, what does that do? But look here at the detune when I increase the inharmonic. So you see it just moves the partials up and down in tuning. So at first it will sound harmonic, but as I change it, it's going to sound more and more inharmonic, like a piece of metal or something. So you can see like that could be used for something like I don't know, some soundtrack for a horror movie or something like that. You could also add effects to it. So if I want to add a reverb and then play like a tritone like this. So as you heard, there's all sorts of different sounds that can come out of this, from, you know, like nice and harmonic. And by doing that, it just gives it some extra movement. But there's all sorts of things you can do with this. There's ways to mix things up. Here I'm using the modal filter, and before I used the wavetable and the normal oscillator. But of course, feel free to use like the wave shaper and all sorts of other things to create movement in these pads and other things. There's a whole world out there with MSoundfactory. So hope that gave you some ideas. If this helped you, give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done that, and check out all the other plugins at meldaproduction.com. Until next time, see you.